Washington, U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel to discuss a range of issues, including tensions with Hezbollah up north and relations with Saudi Arabia. The Special Presidential Coordinator for Global Infrastructure and Energy Security is meeting with the Prime Minister and National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi. So to find out why, our senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman is here in studio. The timing is interesting. Israel dealing with a range of tensions or issues with regional players and with Washington as well. Break down what we know.
Right. Well, two main items on the agenda, Benita, and you ticked them both off. First, the tension on the northern border with Lebanon, and second, the issue of normalization with Saudi Arabia. It seems, Benita, that they were discussed in that order of importance, right? This was a snap visit. It had not been publicized until it was broken by Israeli media this afternoon by Channel 12, and then the Prime Minister's office followed with a very brief statement, simply saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Tzachi Hanegbi, the National Security Advisor, had met with Hochstein to talk about regional developments without further elaboration. So it seems that the tension on the border with Lebanon is what prompted Amos Hochstein to get on the plane and to come to Jerusalem, trying to broker some kind of deal to be able to get both sides down from the tree, to get those tents cleared off of land that Israel sees as land that it controls, and allow maybe Hezbollah to get something in return that Israel feels it can give. Of course, Amos Hochstein has a history here, right? He negotiated the maritime border deal between the Israeli and Lebanese governments against the odds, but allowing the Lebanese to then be able to get the natural gas out of the sea, and for Israel to be able to do that, presumably without the threat of Hezbollah hanging over its head. Of course, Netanyahu fiercely opposed that deal, but at any rate, obviously wants to work with the envoy of the Biden administration. Saudi Arabia. Of course, we don't need Amos Hochstein to tell us where those stocks stand. We have Joe Biden in himself on the record before the cameras in that interview aired on Sunday saying that Saudi normalization is a long way off. No further details about what exactly Amos Hochstein said to the Prime Minister in terms of updating him. He went to Saudi Arabia very recently, so presumably from the horse's mouth, if you will, has the best information on where the Saudis stand. Very important to remind ourselves and to remind viewers that Saudi normalization with Israel isn't really about Israel, right? And Joe Biden told us that himself, right? Even the way that Fareed Zakaria asked that question in the interview with CNN, and certainly in the way that Joe Biden answered the question, this is the issue of Saudi normalization with Israel is not about negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's about negotiations between Saudi Arabia and the United States. And Joe Biden all but confirming reports that we reported here in I-24 News much earlier that what the Saudis are asking for is civilian nuclear power and some kind of defense guarantee from the United States. To quote the U.S. president himself, those are far off. So again, presumably, that's what Amos Hochstein told Benjamin Netanyahu as well. Now, I'm sure that everything that's going on in the country, okay, that you have all seen over the course of the last few minutes, let alone what's gone on in the West Bank in recent weeks, or for that matter, recent months, presumably doesn't help matters with Saudi Arabia. But again, by Joe Biden's own accounting, by the way he answered that question, this is not a negotiation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's a negotiation between Saudi Arabia and the United States. And Joe Biden does not seem all that inclined to give the Saudis what they want. And therefore, the Saudis presumably are not all that inclined to give Joe Biden what he wants, and certainly what Benjamin Netanyahu, what he wants, which is normalization with Israel.
And talking about things that Joe Biden doesn't seem to be wanting to offer at this juncture, very briefly, still waiting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has yet to be officially invited to the White House. That sounds further and further away with each passing day, never mind the protest action that is unfolding as we speak right now in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Joe Biden is holding Netanyahu on a string on this one, right? And then says basically, well, listen, I'm not against Israel. Of course, President Herzog is coming next month. And obviously, Biden, as he said, of course, has a long record of support for Israel and support for the U.S.-Israel relationship. Apparently not too keen on Prime Minister Netanyahu and on policies of the government and decisions maybe that Netanyahu has made himself, including the overhaul. But of course, not only, it's also policy in the West Bank towards the Palestinians. And Biden spoke to that in that CNN interview. So you're right, Benita, it doesn't seem to be close at hand. There seem to be a lot of issues that have to be resolved before that can happen.
Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman, appreciate you breaking down all the latest developments.